finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo and no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to another episode of BS Free MD. Today we're talking about how the road to hell is paved with Percocet.
Indeed.
But before we get there, I want to give you a little brief note from our sponsor. It's a month into 2021. You are finally ready to commit to this year being better than the last, but you're still spending your evenings catching up on notes when you could be leaving work with a clean slate. On Time MD teaches physicians critical time management strategies tailored specifically for the unique demands physicians face. Strategies cover the exam room, inbox, and EHR, meetings, and more. Popular module, How to Delegate Without Dumping, addresses how to delegate tasks to your staff in a way that doesn't make them feel dumped on, but inspires them to do their best work. Course creator Phil Boucher, pediatrician and podcaster, wants you to join other physicians who understand the value of their time but are struggling to make a clear and executable plan of action. Join today and save 15% by using the code 2021 at checkout. You also get a money-back guarantee if you don't reclaim 3 hours a week in the first 2 months. Now is your chance to join On Time MD and reclaim your time for good. Go to drpodcastnetwork.com/ontimemd to get started. So today we are jumping down the road paved to hell on Percocet. In other words,
it's kind of a mellow road, but hell is where it ends.
Follow the mellow brick road.
The mellow brick road.
We're going to be diving into about the modern opioid epidemic, as Tim likes to call the greatest medical error of modern times, and is the greatest example of how expert opinion based on pseudoscience created a deadly groupthink that has killed hundreds of thousands of people. We're going to just jump into why. How do we get here? Because we should have known better. Is it because we as the medical establishment were arrogant and greedy, and also because we kind of stink at treating chronic pain, and we tried to medicalize a lot of this. So let's get into the history first of all.
So first of all, facts. The facts of the opioid epidemic, and I'm specifically from about 1980 on, so for the last 45 years, about 50,000, we're at a point now where we have about 50,000 opioid overdoses a year as far as fatalities, 50,000 fatalities, which is actually slightly more than MVAs, believe it or not. We have a history of 8,000 years of opium use, believe it or not. Started way back with the Sumerians, which are thought to be the oldest civilization in the history of mankind. They called opium Hul Gil, or joy plant. So just as a little background science on that, what's opium? What's the difference between opium, oxycodone, codeine, morphine, etc.? Well, opium is actually the latex that's in the opium poppy. So in the bulb of the opium poppy or flower, you can, peel off the edges and you get this white latex stuff. That's opium.
Not true latex.
No, it's opium latex.
Just in case people are listening and wondering.
Can you imagine opium latex condoms? That would be kind of crazy, wouldn't it? But anyways, so that opium, the latex opium, was used in a whole bunch of different ways. Most commonly, it was smoked. You could just take it, you could put it into a pipe, you could smoke it, and you would get really high. One of my personal favorites is laudanum, where they made a tincture. So a tincture is where you take 100% alcohol and you put the latex in there and dissolve it, and then you could just drink it. So that was super popular in the early 1800s. It was actually kind of a shishi party drink for the upper crust people. They would drink
served up or on the rocks.
That's right. How would you like your laudanum? With no vomiting. please.
Oh, jeez.
So, and then we move on from there. So you have laudanum, you have this use, going back, centuries and centuries, really since the dawn of humans figuring out that this white stuff made you high. People have been getting high with it, no question. So then, when was that? About 1850? Was that it? Let me just double check my where is it here?
Are you going back to the beginning of the?
I'm going back to morphine. So morphine, and the other thing I like about this is what they named stuff, right? So morphine was synthesized in 1806 by a German chemist, Friedrich Wilhelm Adam Suepner, isolated a substance from opium, which he named morphine. Why did he name it morphine? He named it after the god of sleep, or Morpheus.
Wow.
So, pretty cool name. So morphine. So
instead of more, please.
Right. So the thinking back in the early 1800s was that if you used morphine, you'd get all the good part of the opiate without the bad part. See, the problem with laudanum, the problem with smoking just pure opium is there's a lot of these other opiates that are bad, like from a side effect perspective, right? So they're not hitting your mu and kappa receptors and making you feel high and killing pain and whatnot. They're making you sick and nauseated and whatever. So in a way, there was sort of a governor on the system if you were going to drink laudanum, because you could only drink so much 100% alcohol with dissolved opium in it, and you get super sick. So then that was sort of the first foray into the medicalization of opiates was morphine. So that's like, believe it or not, it's 1806. And of course, if it's good drugs, it's coming from the Germans. You know what else the Germans synthesized, believe it or not, just before World War II? Just a little tiny bunny trail?
Chocolate?
No. Methamphetamine.
Oh, yes.
And they put it in pills called Percocet, and they gave it to their soldiers.
That's right.
Yes, it's amazing. Now, that's a whole other topic I'd like to go down. Tremendous book about morphine or drug use in toto in World War II, a book called Blitzed. I actually had to wait for the English translation. So fascinating stuff. So anyways, thank you, Germans, once again. So then we moved on from there to 1850 was the next drug that was synthesized from morphine. So we're getting derivatives from morphine. Morphine is the grandfather of all medicalized opiates. Everything that we use, whether it's codeine, oxycodone, or this new sexy drug that people weren't going to get addicted to, which was, of course, heroin, by Bayer, a gigantic German company, which still exists. The aspirin boys, they're the ones that brought you heroin. And May, what was heroin primarily marketed? What was its primary use? Was it for doling it out on the streets? Was it a party drug? What was it? Was it used for, surgical pain? What was it originally marketed for by those lovely folks at Bayer?
Yeah, it was the catch-all cough syrup.
Cough syrup.
Marketed to families for children's use.
Yes.
You look at the pictures, you can Google the nice pictures from the past and find all those historical cute little photos of moms with their cherub children and big ads for cough suppressant. It's crazy.
Well, there was the one cough suppressant we found in the advertisement. There was heroin, cannabis indica, chloroform, and something else. And it just really, they should have just called it party in a bottle. Like a spoonful of this stuff makes everything go down.
Here we go. We have Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup, the mother's friend for children teething. My favorite, though, is One Night Cough Syrup. Each ounce contains, ingredients listed, alcohol, cannabis indica, chloroform, and morphia.
And morphine. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. One night, because you would only last one night and then you'd be dead. So it's amazing stuff. Where did heroin get its name? Do you remember?
I would be guessing.
It's because it was the heroic drug.
I was going to say some type of heroin or something like that.
So with every one of these iterations, and we've still believed this today, it's still been marketed this way with newer medications that are, like tramadol. It's the non-narcotic narcotic. No, it's just a narcotic, which was every derivative is going to be just as good for pain, but it's going to be less dangerous, less addictive. So heroin, the heroic drug, the first, drug synthesized from morphine. So the next step down the line. And then another nice thing happened around 1853 or so, which was the invention of the hypodermic needle.
Yeah, that I think from my reading is big. The big push in what really got that going was the invention of the hypodermic needle. Then I'm jumping on ahead of you, but then into the war times and treating soldiers for every ailment, from pain, war injuries, to all things that were happening back then. There's no plumbing, so there's dysentery. We've got teething, coughing kids, women with,
menstrual cramps.
Menstrual cramping, every kind of feminine complaint. It was like the catch-all for everything.
Right. And then you started injecting it, which was, of course, a gazillion times worse. And so at the end of the Civil War, so that was like 1865, we had a tremendous number of Civil War veterans that were actually morphine addicts. And they called it the soldier's disease. The soldier's disease at the end of the Civil War was not PTSD. It was morphine addiction. Because, again, very few treatments. And this at least made you temporarily happy. And we had a tremendous way of being able to get it into your system super quickly, without any of the GI issues, which was by shooting it. So there you go. Medicalization again, right? Okay, this is going to be the cure-all. But then it was the soldier's disease, and we're like, what are we going to do? We got to get these guys off of this. This is horrific. So then we get the first foray after the soldier's disease into government regulation. When did that start?
The Harrison tax.
Well, just before the Harrison Tax Act was 1909, Congress passed the Opium Exclusion Act, barring importation of opium for purposes of smoking. So that was the first foray into any kind of governmental war on drugs, which was 1909. This legislation, considered by many to be the official start of the war on drugs in the U.S., in a similar manner, what you just mentioned, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914 placed a nominal tax on opiates and required physician and pharmacist registration for its distribution. So what was it?
Yeah, that included distribution and sale of heroin, opium, and cocaine. All three.
Well, government in the buzzkill business for at least 100 years. So,
and then 10 years later, Congress made it illegal to make, import, or sell heroin in the Anti-Heroin Act of 1924.
Yeah, which is fascinating because you could buy from the Sears catalog heroin with a hypodermic needle in its own little tin from the store. You could be living out in the middle of Des Moines, Iowa, and you could pick up your catalog and you could order yourself some heroin and delivered from the Sears catalog, which is, wow. I mean, Merry Christmas to you. So the Harrison Tax Act, they actually started throwing doctors in jail after the Harrison Tax Act, because what happened was they had a tremendous number of people that were dependent on morphine and heroin. And so it made it illegal to what they call maintain an addict. In other words, if an addict came to you, you couldn't just keep writing them prescriptions to maintain their addiction. And that actually exists all the way to today. That's why we have methadone clinics, because it's illegal to maintain an addict. So if you have somebody that comes in that's addicted to, whatever opiate, and you want to get them off of it by maintaining them on a lower dose but a longer acting opiate like methadone, they have to go to a methadone clinic. The only thing that's changed in that regard is with Suboxone, you can get a special license. So you do have to have special training to do that. And that's an agonist-antagonist. So it blocks the mu kappa receptors as well as stimulating them at the same time. So it's a much more difficult drug to abuse, and has actually worked quite well at getting people off of, heroin and chronic oxycodone and so forth. So that's kind of where things have, these laws that are over 100 years old are still affecting medical practice today, which is fascinating. So there's the history in a nutshell in about 13 minutes of, the beginning, at least in the United States, of morphine, heroin, and opiates. So if we had all of this information, 8,000 years of use, the soldier's disease of drug addiction, 2 opium wars fought between England and China because China was sick of illegal trading of, the British sending opium into China because they had such an opium smoking addicted population that they're like, forget it. And they actually fought a war over it. So if we had all this information, how on earth did we end up with a medicalized prescription drug problem from 1980? That's from 1980 on. Like that one just blows my mind.
Yeah, so we sort of basically blew through the whole history in 10 minutes or less quickly on the the history, how opiates came about, everything. And here we are in the modern world, and we've got this giant problem on our hands. You'd think that with the history we have and us looking back on those ads and laughing at, oh my gosh, you can buy this from the Sears catalog. They're handing out to kids. They're just, it's like the fix-all thing.
Well, his mother's little helper was giving kid cough syrup with like freaking heroin in it.
Yeah,
Well, I got 10 kids. If I only got 9, what difference does it make, right?
It's sad, but look at where we're at. And we're going to talk about how did we get here, and the ads. I just was looking at pictures of some of the ads from the 90s that were marketed in journals and that were handed to us as just regular medical sales pitches, and now it's just as embarrassing.
Yeah, my personal favorite from the 70s is an ad for Quaalude. And it shows, methylqualone, it's been off the market for decades. And it shows this father coming down for breakfast. He's got like the 2 kids and the cheery wife pouring him coffee. And it's like, for a wonderful morning, remember the night before, take Quaalude. And I'm like, I don't know how wonderful the morning was, but the night before was probably really bitching.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that hey, it's wild. So there was an event that started this. And this is absolutely amazing. In this whole problem we have of the modern day prescription drug abuse problem, it started, there was a Franz Ferdinand moment, which is a World War I reference for all of you. Can look it up if you don't know what it is. And it started with a 2-sentence letter to the New England Journal of Medicine in 1980. And I will read the entire letter. The byline is, addiction rare in patients treated with narcotics. To the editor, recently we examined our current files to determine the incidence of narcotic addiction in 39,946 hospitalized medical patients who were monitored consecutively. Although there were 11,882 patients who received at least one narcotic preparation, there were only 4 cases of reasonably well-documented addiction in patients who had no history of addiction. The addiction was considered major in only one instance. The drugs implicated were meperidine or Demerol in 2 patients, Percodan, which is oxycodone and aspirin, in 1, and hydromorphone in 1. We conclude that despite widespread use of narcotic drugs in hospitals, the development of addiction is rare in medical patients with no history of addiction. Okay? So that was it. Tiny little letter, I guess it's 4 sentences from Jane Porter and Herschel Yick, MD, Boston Collaborative Drug Surveillance Program. So, first of all, that wasn't a randomized controlled study. It was a retroactive analysis of, not even 12,000 patients that were given an opioid for pain control, post hospitalization. And it doesn't say exactly, was it post-surgical? Well, most probably were. Was it because they had kidney stones? I mean, there's lots of painful things that you get admitted to without surgeries that you would potentially have an opioid prescription going home. So it was always, the assumption was it was acute pain, not chronic pain. And then they look back and they said, who got addicted? Okay. And while there was only like 4 people out of 11,000. So it's safe. So what grew out of that was amazing. And there was, in June 1st, 2017, in the New England Journal of Medicine, there was a group from Toronto that went back and looked. They did a huge lit search, and they went back and they looked at all the times that.
How did they find that? I mean, were they looking at the history of the opioid epidemic, like the recent studies cited? Like, how did that they get pointed to that article?
They looked at how many times it was quoted, what it was quoted, what studies were used in quotations for expert articles written about using, opioids for pain. And what they came up with was, here's some examples. I mean, they found it was staggering. It was cited like 608 times.
That's crazy.
Okay, that study. And it was never, it virtually never was said, hey, it was just an acute pain. It's a retrospective analysis. It's not a randomized controlled trial, on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so here's some examples from journal articles. So this pain population with no abuse history is literally at no risk of addiction. That is a quote from N. Cowell on pseudo-addiction, or the under-treatment of pain. Remember pseudo-addiction, May? Remember when we'd be treating people? I mean, we were part of this. We wrote these prescriptions. I'm not saying that I was somehow above all the fray and knew this. I was as involved in this. We were as involved in this as any primary care doctor ever was. There's no question. And so the concept of pseudo-addiction was you're treating somebody with opiates, and they start to act like a drug addict. They need more medication. They want more. They become less reasonable. They become kind of a jerk in the office. And the answer was, well, they're not actually addicted. Even though they're acting like an addict, even though it's obvious they're addicted to your prescription, it's pseudo-addiction. They really just need more.
Yeah, because they have pain. And
because they have pain.
They just need more medicine.
Right. Right. But if it was actually working.
Just like you're thirsty, so just to give them some water.
Give them more water.
And they won't act so thirsty.
Exactly. Or, when somebody comes in that's a raging alcoholic, we don't just give them.
Well, they're thirsty.
We don't just, give them benzodiazepine or Librax and a banana bag and treat their potential seizures. We just roll in the mobile bar cart and start the shaker going.
Well,
I mean,
they do that now in the hospital, which that's a whole other ball game, but they do.
Fear of addiction may lead to reluctance by the physician to prescribe. However, there is no evidence that this occurs when prescribing opioids for pain. Okay, and that's from a 2002 article, the Journal of Clinical Practice. In reality, medical opioid addiction is very rare.
Very
in Porter
rare.
and Jick's study, okay, Porter and Jick's, that was this study that was the 4 sentences.
Wait. How did they get to that brilliant conclusion? Very rare, looking back on the whole 1900s and what happened.
Because that's what I call the first.
This stuff sounds like a bunch of BS.
Right, but that's what I call the first big lie. Okay, and the first big lie in this, okay, is the arrogance that you can do it right. Just because somebody in the past did it wrong doesn't mean that you can't do it right. Just because every single time opiates were tried, they failed and caused addiction, was because we didn't do it right.
Right. It wasn't like there was any big new study that they discovered with regards to...
No, there was this retrospective analysis of 11,000 people.
Neurochemistry of the brain that they're basing this on.
No. It's a bias. It's a bias. And it's, C.S. Lewis talks about this ancient bias, is that ancient wisdom somehow isn't as wise as new wisdom. When in reality, ancient wisdom is actually really better, because if it was ancient bullshit, we wouldn't remember it. It would be gone. So the fact that it still exists means that it at least has, significant elements of truth. But we have this time bias. Okay. It's like if I didn't think of it in my generation, then it must be crap, because the generations before us were obviously, stupid. And so this concept, but it happened through the entire history of opiates, right? Opium is bad. The latex is bad. So we'll synthesize morphine. It'll be better because it's science. Well, but morphine's kind of bad too. And so what we'll do is we'll synthesize heroin, the heroic drug, because it's better. And there was reports that I read where people thought that you wouldn't get addicted to heroin, okay, if you injected it.
Wow.
As long as you inject, if you drank it in that cough syrup and fed it to your teething child, well, that might be bad. But if you shot it, if you mainlined it, well, then it might be okay. And this is the exact same error. It's that we can do it better. We can use the same deadly ancient medication and somehow do it in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and somehow we'll do it better.
Well, we're going to get to how they did it better.
Are we ever going to get to
how
they got it better? So then what happened was there was a couple other real misinterpretations that came out of this concept of the first big misinterpretation out of this study was number one, if you have pain, if you have an organic source of pain, in other words, if you have obvious arthritis on an X-ray or something like this where you have chronic pain, number one, we can treat that and you won't become an addict. And I was trained that way. We were trained that way in medical school. That was the thinking when we started practice. If you have
pain, right? If you have real pain, you won't become a drug addict.
Right. And it doesn't matter if it's chronic pain. Okay, that was the thing. Even though this study that this thinking was based on had nothing to do with chronic pain. And a chronic versus an acute condition, they're two totally different things.
Mm-hmm.
How you deal with it psychologically, how your body changes and how your brain receptors, like everything's different in a chronic problem. It's like the difference between somebody that's been depressed off and on for 30 years versus somebody going through a loss and grief. They feel the same. You end up at a different place.
Right.
Because chronic problems are not acute problems. They're totally different. But we expanded that. We said, hey, we suck at treating chronic pain. That's the truth. We absolutely do. And then the most arrogant of all, which is, therefore, there must be a way to deal with it. Just because we have a real problem dealing with a certain problem, a real issue, doesn't mean that there's a solution for it. We also have a real problem treating death. We've sucked at that for ever. And so this idea of, we are bad at treating chronic pain. So we need to do something different.
Well, remember, I remember being, trying to remember what year that was, mandated to go to the classes by the state on the physicians not treating pain. You're not actually neglecting your patients. You're not treating their pain. We had to go to a class where they basically berated us that we weren't actually prescribing enough pain medication.
That's exactly right. When we started practice, we went to a, government of Oregon, state-sponsored, you suck at treating pain, treat pain better. And then, of course, 4 years ago, we had to go to a mandated government thing. You write too many opioids and you're killing the whole frickin' population.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. Love it. So governments got involved. So then we got some really super crazy stuff. So the Joint Commission got involved. The Joint Commission is one of the certification agencies that certifies your hospitals and so forth. These guys are Joint Commission surveys are hilarious. Hospital administrators just completely lose their minds. All the toasters are hidden because it might fall into the sink, and then you're going to get dinged by Joint Commission.
I know every time they show up, you kind of usually get like a heads up because they're in the area, and it's like maybe a day's notice, and next thing you know, your office managers are running to the car with all the Keurigs and toasters and my heater to keep me warm.
Right.
Because it's not code.
So suffice it to say, Joint Commission is a big deal. This is a regulatory body that kind of has its thumb on regulating the healthcare industry. Well, interestingly enough, this "we suck at treating pain, we need to do a better job" leaked into the Joint Commission. And by 2001, a lot of this stuff was pushed by pain societies, American, Association of Pain Doctors and all the rest of this. Do they have a financial interest in treating pain? Yeah. Is that why they did it? I don't know. Could have been all 100% great motives. And that's what I said. The road to hell is paved with Percocet. The point is, I'm not going to judge any of these motives at this time. But here you go. So what did they come up with in 2001? which always pissed me off. I thought this was completely insane, which is pain is the fifth vital sign. So every single patient that came in, you could come in for a hangnail, you could come in for your, twice every other year pap smear, and you got your pulse taken, your respirations taken, your blood pressure taken, and asked how much freaking pain you're in. What's your pain level today?
Or if you couldn't do that, point to the faces.
Okay, guess what? It's not a vital sign. It's subjective. It's impossible to make something subjective a vital sign. But nonetheless, we did it. Okay?
Oh, I know it would drive me crazy. It still drives me crazy because someone will come in with a hangnail, and it's 10 out of 10. And someone comes in literally with an amputation, and it's like,
right.
It's hurting, but I have a high pain tolerance, and they're like at a 7. It's just total bogus.
No, I had a kidney stone, and it was probably a 6 because I thought, you know what? If I was lit on fire, it would hurt more.
I know.
Lit on fire would hurt more.
I have, in my darkest moments, said that to patients when they say, but it hurts, it's 10 out of 10. And I say, well, if I sawed your arm off, then what would your pain level be? And then, of course, it's like 13. I mean, I'm
the one I want to use, though, is if I took glass and epoxied it to a baseball bat and anally violated you with it, would it hurt more than what you're experiencing now?
Oh, my goodness.
Because if it wouldn't hurt more, it's not 10.
No, I prefer those photo images. It's like the mild ones. And the extreme is like, I don't know, there's a grizzly bear mauling someone. Right. There's one with somebody's limb amputated. There's one of them on fire. And all the way down.
Yeah, people are like, my pain level's 10, and they're texting. Mine was maybe a 6.5 with a kidney stone, and I was praying for God to have a meteorite crush me.
Well, he had a meteorite in your urinary system.
Yeah, well, it was a grain of sand, but boy, did it get the point across. Okay, so we suck at treating pain. Therefore, there must be a way to unsuck at treating pain.
And what did they come up with then?
So then pain is the fifth vital sign. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now it's on everyone's mind. Treat pain, treat pain, treat pain, treat pain. So, okay, well, what happened? Well, you got a skyrocketing of opiate prescribing. Around 1990?
1995.
Are you
talking about when Oxy came out?
No, we're getting there. We're getting there right now, which was, okay, so now we have the medical establishment misinterpreting a study. Okay, bad. Government getting involved saying, you guys suck, prescribe more pain medicine because people are in pain. And then we have Purdue Pharma that did for cocaine what crack did with OxyContin. So oxycodone is actually a fairly old drug. It was approved in the United States, I believe, in the 50s. But they did something delicious if you're a drug addict. They made big, giant dose oxycodone and they coated these tablets in a nice little varnish. So so if you get a Percocet, you get a 5 or a 10 milligram. You're getting 5 or 10 milligrams of oxycodone with Tylenol. Okay, but if you got OxyContins, you were getting usually 40 or 80 milligrams of oxycodone coated with a little varnish. I had no idea how this became a drug of abuse because it's long acting. Okay, because it's long acting. I had a couple come in and they wanted to be treated. They needed to be sent because they were opiate addicts. And I asked them, I said, so how does Oxy work? This is the exact quote. There's just a little bit of varnish on the pill. You lick all the varnish off, and now you have pure Oxy. They said, you can snort it, you can shoot it, or you can smoke it, but that shit's going to get you high. That was the exact quote, and I was like, you're telling me they painted this with varnish, said that it was long-acting, and then just dispensed like gajillions of these?
I remember watching a documentary about it. It showed kids at home with the pills, smoking them, literally just crushing them up and smoking them. I was like blown away. And I'm like, here we are prescribing these things.
So Purdue Pharma produced another one of the lies, which was, if it's long acting, you're not going to get high.
Well, do you remember them marketing that to us?
Totally. Well, it's long acting. You got a patient with chronic pain. They're not getting the big, and then they have all the freaking graphs with the plasma levels and all this.
The drug reps came out, and the marketing push was that you'd start them on OxyContin because it's long acting. You didn't have to use the short term, and they were trained. And I just remember them saying this all the time: is the new drug to start with and to stay with.
Yes,
that was their
and to
tagline.
break into pharmacies and steal, because obviously it's not a drug of abuse. Remember all the pharmacy break-ins during the big Oxy thing? So,
oh yeah.
So that was the other big lie. So number one, you can treat chronic pain with opiates. Number two, if they're long-acting, you're going to be just fine. So then we did something else, because OxyContin was still a little bit pricey. So we started prescribing methadone as a long-acting opiate to try to control chronic pain. Well, the problem with that was methadone has active metabolites. So as your body breaks it down, some of the metabolites are still active. Well, it's very long-acting, and it tends to not get people as high. It's nothing like oxycodone or morphine or heroin. So then people would stack doses of the methadone. They'd build up all these active metabolites. They wouldn't necessarily feel like they were that stoned. They'd go to bed and wake up dead because of all these active metabolites. It just absolutely ridiculous. Well, plus, they weren't super wasted on the opiates, so they combine all these other medications, benzodiazepine, alcohol, you name it.
Plus, the other thing that happened too, though, is because I know that a lot of articles written really put a lot of the blame on big pharma pushing marketing to doctors. That was still in the time when they could buy you cool stuff like more than pens and notepads, but you'd get like fishing hats and cups and trips. And
they used to give trips. Like
mm-hmm.
I'm like I went cat skiing.
Yeah, you did.
2001.
I didn't get any cat skiing out of it. I think
those
I got a
were the
briefcase
days
out of it. And early on, there's reports that people in pharma, that even were pushing and selling it, knew that there was this addictive potential, but they're still out there doing their push. And, that in itself, plus then the direct-to-consumer marketing happened.
Right. And it all happened. It was all kind of which again, FDA, who approved direct-to-consumer advertising, FDA. So, so now we have bad science on the medical establishment side. We have bad regulation and bad, almost coercion on the government side and regulatory side. And then you get the big pharma, if you want to say greed side going in this, and holy cow, now you have a real forest fire going. And and it's really easy. It's like, well, the opioid epidemic was Purdue's fault. No, Purdue has a lot of blame in this, but it's not Purdue's fault. Not a single executive from Purdue, not a single one of them wrote a single prescription for oxycodone.
Although apparently they made, $13 billion off of that, and have donated nil to any kind of drug rehab programs.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. And the reason I don't is there's the whole issue of, we could get into this on another podcast, which is big rehab. There's a tremendous amount of money to be made in big rehab facilities, especially if you have, the well-to-do that are going into them. So to produce the drug, it's pretty hard to have plausible deniability that your drug is a drug of abuse when you're contributing a ton of money and building rehab centers. It's just like, hey, you got them on both ends, right? It's like lawyers, right? They make the laws and they practice the law. It would be like if we made the diseases and we treated the diseases.
Right.
That would be really lucrative, actually.
Really?
We kind of made this disease, though. Let's be honest.
No
And so I think the medical staff, I think, us personally, like, hey, I have had patients, lots. I remember a day vividly when I was still a primary care doctor, where one of my nurses looked at it and said, "You know what? You have way too many refills for this stuff. What are we going to do about it?" It gave me a little pause and a sobering look and go, "Yeah, this is ridiculous. Let's start doing something about it." And so we started drug testing patients, and it was unbelievable what you'd find, because so many people would not have, they'd be on, 3 Percocets a day or whatever it was, and you'd randomly drug test them.
Was negative.
Their drug test was negative because they were just selling it. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm part of this. This is absolutely ridiculous.
Or their caregiver, someone in their family, was abusing it. And
I had an 88, 89-year-old guy scamming me for opiate pills because he'd give them to his daughter and his daughter would sell them. He was essentially the fence. He's in a wheelchair, super nice old dude. I'm like, he's never going to abuse this. I mean, the guy's all crippled up. You know, he needs this. No, it's straight to his daughter. I mean,
he pulled the wool over your eyes. Me too.
He did. No, but I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I'm not coming in this podcast. I'm not coming from a position of I know better. I'm coming from the position of the entire establishment should have known better. You know, this is, you know, what we talk about. It, you know, relying on expert opinion is not science. Okay, but we have to rely on expert opinion as practicing physicians. We do. You can't possibly read every study about every single treatment you're going to do. It's impossible. Medical knowledge is too vast. It's too vast. It's too it changes all the time. It explodes with more information. You have to be able to rely on experts, and that's what just blows my mind about this. How come there wasn't some you know, John the Baptist crying from the wilderness, there's no good data. We're doing something to people and there's no good data. And finally, the good data was, holy crap, people's lives are being robbed. They're way less productive. They're addicts and they're dying. And then we were like, oh crap, we're part of this. And we pulled back.
It's so hard when you're a doc and you're caught in the middle because, yes, I mean, you're there really. Most good doctors, physicians, there's always a few on the fringes, but I mean, you're trying to help your patients. You see these people who have true pain, who are suffering. You're trying to help. You know, this is the new thing, what we got. I mean, sure, there's a lot of times when you're questioning that stuff. It's hard. I mean, well, I'm not saying that it's the right thing to, you know, just cave in and give.
No,
I mean, no matter what it is, but I mean, we get caught up in other things too. I mean, weight loss drugs that we've given to people knowing that it's probably not a good idea. It's going to impact their health. I mean, gosh, we even get on the fringes prescribing things, sedatives or even anti-inflammatories when people have no business being them. I mean, it's hard because you want to, you know, I want to help our patient, but
right.
It's hard to be the bad guy sometimes.
I'm not
and say, no, what are we doing?
I'm not passing judgment on anybody's intention, even Purdue Pharma. Okay, you're running a small pharmaceutical company. You've found the goose. You have produced the goose that lays the golden egg. Of course, you're in business. Your business is to make money. So make as much money as you can. You know, where they got caught was in, you know, the deception
right,
stuff.
What I'm saying is, were we blinded to the deception because of our intention?
Oh, I think so. We wanted to help people. We wanted to, you know, do the best by our patients. We wanted to make people happy. You know, sometimes you just want to make them go away. Let's be honest. It's a lot easier to write that prescription for a couple extra Percocets with somebody with an ankle sprain where really they should never need that. And they leave and you get to see the next patient.
There's that part of this whole equation too, which, you know, you tossed in, but that happens all the time. Absolutely.
Well, it happens with antibiotics.
Right.
Probably hundreds of thousands of times a day in the United States. You know, that's another conversation. And so the fact is then, you know,
the road to hell in Percocet, I mean, is really multifactorial when, you know, we've unpacked that today. I mean, looking at you know, not being blinded to history. I mean, history repeats itself. We should have known better based on where we're at. The whole medicalization piece of it, like you touched on, the advertising, direct to consumer, the industry's part of it, the whole wool being pulled over our eyes, as physicians not doing better, looking at studies that made false claims, to wanting to help our patients, to people always going to have abuse potential.
The thing that's amazing to me, though, is that every piece of the healthcare industrial complex got it wrong at the same time. Okay, like you can have one arm. Okay, like you have a government regulatory arm, which is also a billing arm. You know, with Medicare and Medicaid, you have the pharmaceutical arm, which, you know, you have to have. You know, people are like, big pharma's bad. Well, really? Well, who's making the vaccine? It's not small pharma. It's not a guy in his garage. It's gigantic companies because they have the infrastructure to do that. So
we're the monkey in the middle, really.
Right. And so
we are the dispenser of the pills.
Right. But it's just amazing. It's like, the guys that are doing the studies that are the experts got it wrong. The guys that are the regulators relied on those experts and got it wrong and pushed it to the next level. And then once you got giant money involved in this, it just went completely bananas. I mean, it really is like cocaine turning into crack, where you could make 10 times as much money for the same volume of cocaine if you turned it into crack, and people got more high.
Yeah.
Like, wow, isn't that something? So cocaine went from this drug of almost like the aristocracy, right? You were the film producer. I mean, I remember reading books about guys would go sign record contracts, and in today's day and age, they pull out a bottle of Chablis. Back in the day, it was like everyone did a couple lines. That's what it was. And then you destroyed all these inner cities with crack once and so here we go. We own this. What did you say? You read that quote that 4 out of 5 heroin addicts started on prescription medications?
Yes.
So we're getting close to the end of this one. So that's the 3 big lies and how like all levels got it wrong. That's the one that just blows me away. So we are going to do another episode. It may not be the next episode, but it will be soon, on where we went from 2010. Because at 2000, if you look at the graphs, prescription opiate prescribing started to go down in 2010. So that was 11 years ago. So we're going to talk in the next time we get into the opiate world, we're going to talk about where we have gone from there since we have decreased prescribing, and how it's gotten way, way, way worse and way more deadly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Significantly, where we could make an argument we should have just kept writing prescriptions. So that's for the, now we'll keep you in suspenders as they call a cliffhanger for that one. We really hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gives you a little jaundiced eye every time you listen to an expert. Doesn't mean that we don't listen to experts, but it means that we don't worship them. Experts, scientific experts have kind of become the priests and the prophets of modern day. We always want priests and prophets. That's how we think as humans. The difference was in ancient times, if you were a false prophet, which meant you didn't get 5 out of 6 prophecies right, you got all of them right. If you got one wrong, you were a false prophet. And false prophets were taken outside the city and stoned. And I don't mean that they got a hookah and all got wasted. Some guy started throwing rocks.
Literally stoned.
Literally a mob got rocks and threw rocks at you until you were dead. Like, who invented that? Right? Like, it's
I want to know how it went from stoned, that being literally stoned, to stoned. Can you look that up for us? Share that next episode.
The history of getting stoned.
There you go. And on that note, let's wrap her up. All right. So before we end, I just want to remind you to get out there, use that 15% off code for On Time MD by our sponsor, Dr. Phil Boucher, to gain control of your life, your focus, and your time. Reach out at drpodcastnetwork.com/ontimemd and use code 2021 at checkout. See you next time.
See you next Thursday.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit, uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more, and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.